What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Father Dynasty. I am your bald host, Chew, here to talk a little fatherhood and a little Dynasty fantasy football. And here in the manhole, I have a new decoration for those on the video medium. As you can see, I have a Shroot Buck behind me. Thanks to my brother-in-law, he gave me the Shroot Buck, so I think it's 50 Stanley nickels, I think is the conversion rate. I don't remember the exact quote, but yeah, huge fan of The Office, as you can see. A number of my other things are sports related, but if you get a Shroot Buck, you got to put it up. So to all those listeners out there, like, subscribe, review, do whatever you can. I appreciate the support. Let me know on Instagram what you think at Father Dynasty. I always appreciate feedback, what you like, what you don't like, and what you'd like to see going forward. Something different, a little bit of the same. And just to clear the air, so I made it almost 22 full days of not drinking alcohol. And I did, in fact, break that streak, but I broke it in grand fashion with a number of different liquors. Got to go to a friend's house, and I haven't seen them in a very long time, and got to see their house for the first time as well. And it was pretty great because also got to spin the wheel of shots, and it started with gin, which was terrible, as even, I guess, good gin is still terrible. And then, mixed in some of the nicest bourbon I've ever had in my life. And what else did we pepper in? I think it was a tequila shot in there at some point. There's a blueberry muffin, which is I think it's Bailey's and blueberry Red Bull or something to that effect. So good times. And I think I ended it with a Fireball shot. So a little bit of everything, a smorgasbord of liquors, if you will. So wasn't feeling great this morning, but bounced back. And of course, being a parent, you can never be too hungover to get you out of being a parent. So you just kind of have to deal with that. And we've got yet another week of NFL playoffs almost in the book as I am recording this, and I'm currently watching the game. The Bills and the Chiefs are playing right now. We got the Chiefs up 23 to 21 and got about 9 minutes left in the game. So I guess probably by the end of this podcast, I will have known what happened there. This week, we do have another Fatherhood in 5. Again, that's where I talk about what's currently going on in my life as a father in what I believe to be 5 minutes. And also got another Dynasty update. It's a little bit of a look of the Dynasty landscape as the season ends with the playoffs and everything and what teams are going to look like for the next year. So let's get into Fatherhood in 5. So Fatherhood in 5, like I previously said, this is where I kind of just talk about my experience as a father, likely what has occurred in the last week from episode to episode. And the trials and tribulations, if you will, of being a father. And this past week was a real treat because it was a short work week because of the holiday on Monday. And we also had a snowstorm on Monday, that was apparently so bad, at least it was perceived to be bad enough, that Finn did not go to preschool Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And did, in fact, go Friday. And thankfully, I think we were supposed to get more snow. We didn't get more snow, so we should be good now. But an absolute treat. My wife was absolute trooper in terms of taking that head on, and ended up taking Friday off to be able to help out with that. But as you can see, Finn being home from preschool that entire week made my hair fall out, as it does sometimes. Stress can do that to you. And for those that are watching on YouTube, if you feel this is too much, if you too much to kind of take in at once, you can pop over to Spotify or the many other podcast services if you want to enjoy the podcast unencumbered by the visual experience that is my bald head as we speak now. And another nice positive note to it, Finn dislikes this haircut so much, he was actually mildly upset when he first saw me with it. And I did wake him up from a nap, so I get it. And he also had basically just told me to get a different one and said that this one's too sharp. It's because it's kind of like stubbly. So he's yet to come around on it, but I guess he will at some point because he's just going to have to get used to it. As I said before, we got a bunch of snow on Sunday and Monday. Thankfully, we didn't get any more. I think we were supposed to get some on like Thursday and Friday. thankfully that wasn't the case. And needless to say, Finn got plenty of time playing on the couch, playing in the basement, which is now more organized, thanks to my wife helping out with that, and going on car rides, doing chores and that sort of thing. So I would definitely say the whole only child thing works when it also is him getting the chance to go to preschool and get that interaction with other kids that he really otherwise doesn't get, which I'll talk about something here in a second that he's getting back into for an activity. But just to clarify here, there's no regrets on the sticking to the one and done system of Finn being an only child. I mean, if it's good enough for the college basketball elite, it's good for me. I think I've learned apparently a pandemic and snow is apparently not a good combination for preschool, since it ends up getting preschool closed left and right. Definitely a tough thing to deal with when you're trying to both be working parents and kind of navigate that. But thankfully, I know my wife's an absolute boss in the sense of being able to work with all that stuff, and certainly not an easy thing to do, but I absolutely appreciate it. And what I was just referencing in terms of Finn kind of getting that interaction with other kids, he is getting back into soccer. And I remember back in the day, I played, but also I was a referee. And when you're a referee, you kind of start at the younger kids, and then you kind of work your way up. And I remember it really is the B mentality, where it's kind of just like wherever the ball goes, you kind of just see everybody going around with it. And the funny thing was, in the first one, he did it last year. That was the youngest one. That was essentially like a warehouse that they've kind of converted to put like the fake turf, or I'm trying to think. They put the turf down, and then it's kind of like a part of like the travel soccer team, like it's their facility to use. But for this youngest one, I think it's like ages like 2 and 3. They basically put him in like a little corner and like kind of cone it off if like that's going to stop a 2-year-old. And now with this one, it's ages 3 to 5. Finn is now 3, but super tall for his age. And he's everywhere. He is the Tasmanian devil of that group, in the sense of it took my wife and I being at opposite ends of the like closed off area. It's kind of just divided up by nets for like the different groups. So it was pretty crazy having to, if he was on the furthest corner, trying to get him to focus on the coach, be on this cone. It was kind of cool what the coaches were asking them to do in terms of working on the dribbling, on the shooting, on the focus, basically. And Finn wasn't great at the focus part. He at one point actually ran full off the field and like around the net to the other age group for playing soccer. And another bad thing too is it's like when you go to chase after him and they're like calling his name, he thinks it's the game of chasing him. So then he just gets faster and, is actually actively trying to avoid you. So it makes it a pretty tough thing to actually catch him, because then you're like, no, you have, like, if we're going to come here and play soccer, you're going to go and play soccer, not aimlessly run around over here with the other kids. And then we have to reel you back in and have to figure that out. So it was definitely a treat. It's one of those things. I know he's going to be very good at sports. I mean, he's smart, he's quick. Quick as in like he's quick-minded, quick-witted, but also very fast. But trying to reel it in, he kind of reminds me of it was in one of the Mighty Ducks movies. I think the one player that he could skate incredibly fast, but he couldn't stop. I feel like that's what Finn is in terms of trying to get him to focus, first of all, but also be fast, but kind of in the right direction. So go straight and kick the ball as hard as you can that way, instead of having, I'm going to run this way. I see a cool water bottle over there. I'm going to go get that. And once I get that, I'm going to run and bring it over to this guy. And then I'm going to go see some cool thing over there. Like, it's just chaos. But this was the first week for him, because we got in 1 week late, of this class. And he's got another 6, I want to say. So hopefully he kind of gets the hang of it. And that's what happened last year. He kind of got the hang of it, but was a little bit not, we'll get a little upset and kind of lose focus. So we'll see how it goes. I'm excited to see, and I think he's going to do really well. And we'll be practicing in the basement. So that is Fatherhood in 5. And for the Dynasty update this week, as we are another week into the playoffs now. We have had wild card week, and then what is currently, again, finishing up, as I said, with the Bills and Chiefs, the divisional round. So after this week, or after today, we'll have the conference championship set in stone, and then there would be the Super Bowl after that. So we have wild card week and the divisional week of games that are over, and you have teams that have already lost and are out of the playoffs. And much like Finn's preschool getting snowed out, I was looking at the teams who have been snowed out of the playoffs, if you will, and looking at their QB situations for 2022 and how all that's going to look. A lot of factors in terms of their age, their contract, their coach, their GM, other players around them, everything like that. Most importantly, probably their performance. So I'll pull together a number of stats and kind of just going to talk about that. And all these stats are from fantasypros.com, just for reference here. So the first one, we've got the Bengals beating the Raiders in wildcard weekend. It was the Bengals beat them 26-19. And this is, of course, Derek Carr, 30 years old, finishing up another good season, in my opinion. He finished up his QB 12 and 286 fantasy points over 18 games, about 4,800 passing yards, which is actually a career high for him. 23 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, so good, not great. And not too much rushing to speak of, but he did have, I was shocked to look at some of these stats for the quarterbacks. 13 fumbles, but lost 5 of them. So looking at his situation, I know it's going to be a new coach, it's going to be a new GM, or I guess it could be the same coach, the guy that was the special teams, who stepped in as the placeholder, if you will. But I'm not sure if he's going to end up keeping the job. I know getting rid of the GM too, I would think they're going to go with an outside hire. That sounds like the players seem to like the current coach, so we'll see what happens. Being 30 years old, Derek Carr, I think, has 1 year left on his deal, his extension that he had gotten 4 or 5 years ago. He's done well, but I think he's always been a little bit underappreciated. So I do kind of hope he goes to a different team. I guess it depends on what the coach and GM situation looks like. But he's always had some weapons, but not a lot of great ones. And it would kind of be cool. He is still 30 years old, so not too old by any means. But to see him go to a different team and maybe have better weapons and have a better chance to do something, I don't think he's top 5 by any means in quarterback, but I think he's definitely in the top half of the league, and it would be good to see him get a chance to do something into the playoffs. Next, we got the Patriots losing to the Bills 17-47. And this is Mac Jones finished at the top for rookie quarterbacks. He finished QB 15, 255 fantasy points over 18 games, 3,800 yards, 22 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. A little bit of rushing, but not too much to speak of. Like I said, the highest rookie quarterback scoring for the 2021 season. It did kind of seem like it started pretty well, and then it kind of fizzled out in the latter half of the season. So we'll see what's going on there. I know that they'll probably bring in a little more talent for him to be able to help him out in terms of weapons for himself. So he was one of those guys coming into the league. It seemed that he was spoken about as may not have an incredibly high ceiling, but does have a pretty high floor. And I would say going into a Bill Belichick offense, that's got to be helpful in the sense of, there was one game I think he had 2 passing attempts. So it's really just working within trusting the system and working within the confines of what you need to do. And I'd be curious to see next year if he's given a little more leeway of more responsibility, or it's still Belichick's team, obviously, so he just kind of does what he thinks best on a game-to-game basis. Next, we've got the Eagles losing to the Bucks 15-31, and Jalen Hurts having QB8, having a very good season, 339 fantasy points over 16 games, and about 3,100 passing yards, and 16 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. But he did have 139 rushing attempts for 780 yards and 10 rushing touchdowns. Unbelievable. And so I think the combination of everything of what he brings offensively, I think is pretty incredible. And to point this out too, he had 9 fumbles, but only lost 2. And that's with him having 139 rushing attempts. I think that's pretty incredible. And I know with the fumbles lost, I know you can't necessarily control if you're going to win it or lose it. But I think that's a pretty incredible thing with the amount that he's rushing with the ball, that he was able to do that. It was encouraging to see the Eagles GM, Howie Roseman, confirm that Hurts is their guy despite losing how they did in the playoffs versus the Buccaneers. I think it's pretty good that the Eagles made it as far as they did. Hopefully they can turn it around and do well next year. So I know his passing was not incredible this year, but he was a very good rushing threat. And I think his leadership had seemed to be pretty impactful. So I'm glad that he's earned the respect of GM and everything there. So we got two more from the wild card weekend. So we got the Niners beat the Cowboys 23-17. So for the Cowboys, it's Dak Prescott. He finished at QB6, 352 fantasy points over 17 games, just under 4,500 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, which is a career high, 10 interceptions, so pretty efficient, 48 rushes, 146 rushing yards, 1 rushing touchdown. This one was a little surprising, 14 fumbles and lost 6, so a little bit higher than I would have expected. And I know that Dak's already got the bag. You already got that contract extension. And well-earned, in my opinion. We'll see what it looks like with that offense next year in terms of there's been the talk about you now have CeeDee Lamb, you have Amari Cooper, you have Michael Gallup, there's Dalton Schultz, you have Zeke. Like you have a number of weapons there. And does Michael Gallup leave in free agency? I have to think he does. And if that's the case, you make sure you keep Cooper because I heard something about his cap hit maybe is not too terrible so they could release or trade. I assume they would trade him instead of releasing him. Wildly underappreciated player, in my opinion. Amari Cooper, both as a fantasy asset and as just a wide receiver in the NFL. And CeeDee Lamb, of course, being young stud wide receiver. He's not going anywhere. So I'm curious to see how the Cowboys divvy up their money and how they keep the offensive line good. And their defense really showed up this year. So I'm excited to see what they do with that, if they're able to keep building on that, and that wasn't just a one-year fluke. And I think in the division they play in, I think their defense can keep them in a lot of games in the division, so that should be good. The final one from the wildcard weekend was the Steelers losing to the Chiefs 21-42. I mean, just a spectacular loss. And this is, of course, assuming that Big Ben is actually retiring. Watching him this season, and even the season before that, and probably the season before that, I think it's about time. I've heard that Tomlin is kind of talking about that Mason Rudolph and Dwayne Haskins, they're going to be given a shot. And I mean, I get why they would be given a shot. They are on the roster, so I understand that. But we've seen enough of Mason Rudolph on this team. And then we've also, I think, seen enough with Dwayne Haskins when he was in Washington, although I know that situation was pretty tumultuous. But I am finding it very hard to believe that either of those guys are what the Steelers need to go forward, especially given what that team looks like right now in terms of that defense. And I guess the other narrative could be they're saying that now, but then they could end up drafting Kenny Pickett. So you pick the hometown guy in terms of a guy that, went to college Pitt and could come in and is conceivably pretty NFL ready in the sense of he's older. He's, taking a lot of snaps and seems pretty composed and overall pretty solid. So I'm hoping it's not either of those guys, not Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins. I mean, if they earn it, obviously I'd love to see that, but I don't think they're going to based on their work thus far in the NFL, but we'll see what happens. And to cap off the divisional weekend, which great batch of games. It's been incredible to watch these. So the Bengals beat the Titans with a last-second field goal by Evan McDaddy McPherson, 19-16. And so that leaves Ryan Tannehill. He finished QB 13 with 282 fantasy points. And he is 33 years old. So kind of getting up there a little bit, but not too old yet. And had about 3,700 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. So not too great there with the touchdown to interception ratio. 55 rushing attempts, 270 passing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns. Pretty good. Started slow for the Titans, for Tannehill and for the Titans as well. And then they obviously lost Derrick Henry for a number of weeks there, but they got him back here at the tail end, and I guess just was not quite enough to beat the surging Bengals. I mean, they are, I believe I had heard that the Titans set a playoff record for sacks. Like they had sacked Burrow 9 times. But in a game that you break a playoff sack record, and still lose, that's tough. And I think that does speak volumes about the offense in a negative way, because if you can sack the other quarterback 9 times and you still can't win the game, that's just a tough look there. Next, we've got the 49ers beating the Packers in a last-second field goal also, 13-10. And Niners, at the beginning of the season, they were my pick to win it all. I know it didn't start out too well for them, but they've strung together a lot of good games at the end of the season, and they're still doing well now. And Aaron Rodgers finished QB9, 336 fantasy points over 16 games. In my opinion, Aaron Rodgers is the MVP. I don't know what the media thinks of him. From what it sounds like, probably not incredibly well, but about 4,100 passing yards, 37 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. Unbelievable. And had 3 rushing touchdowns and 3 fumbles, but did not lose a single one. So 4 total turnovers as a quarterback. And that level of efficiency, with the fact that it's pretty obvious that he is one of the more talented quarterbacks to ever play this game in terms of just his physical gifts. But with everything what happened this past offseason with he and Gutekunst, I believe is his name, the GM for the Packers, I don't know if he's going to be back. I don't think he's done with football. He's 38 years old, but he's still playing like high-level stuff here. So I don't think he's done with football, but I don't know if he's going to still be in Green Bay. And it would be cool to see. I know Devontae Adams is also, I think his contract is up. It would be cool to see them both go somewhere else together, although I know the Packers do have a pretty solid team as a whole. And I think that he does have some good weapons there. He does have a good O-line, a solid defense, and I mean, that's a reason they made it this far in the playoffs. Wherever he goes, I think he certainly is going to do incredibly well. And just for the sake of parity in the NFL, it would be pretty cool to see him go to a different team just to kind of change it up a little bit, but we'll see what happens with that. And the last one I'm going to talk about, as the other game is not quite up yet, got the Rams beating the Bucks 30-27, and that was a very wild game. So Tom Brady finished QB3, 406 fantasy points, and at the ripe age of 44, he set career highs in passing yards with 5,300, 43 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. 12 is not a career high. I think it's pretty close, but not quite a career high for him. And he did, in fact, pepper in 2 rushing touchdowns. It sounded as though the week leading up to this game, there seemed to be a bit of discussion of that he may, in fact, be done after this one. And I don't know if the thought was, oh, I'm done after this one if I win. If I lose, I still need to have something approved and come back. I mean, 7 Super Bowl victories. He's gone to 10. And, I mean, the amount of accolades he has, he's the best quarterback to ever play the game. He could stop today and he'd be perfectly fine. So I hope he does come back. It's incredible to be able to watch him do what he does at this age, do it so well. But he could be done. I mean, I can only imagine playing for as long as he has, accomplishing is what at the amount that he has, and ending this way versus ending it with a Super Bowl victory. But if this is it, I mean, it's been a hell of a career. And as I mentioned, the Bills-Chiefs game is not quite over yet. It's actually the Bills are up 29-26 with about 2 minutes left. But I don't think we really need, regardless of who wins that game, I think both of those quarterbacks are pretty set and secure in their situation, with Josh Allen for the Bills and Patrick Mahomes for the Chiefs. So either way, they're going to be back on the team. They both have boatload of weapons, and they're each on top 5 offenses. So I think they'll be okay. And that wraps it up for this week's episode of Father Dynasty. And I want to give a huge appreciation to everyone tuning in, liking, subscribing, reviewing, commenting, whatever gets that algorithm going. And follow me on Instagram at Father Dynasty. Let me know what you think, what you like, what you don't like. Any thoughts that have nothing to do with this podcast. Just have a chat. Why not? And to all those Dynasty daddies out there, cheers to no more hair, and hopefully no more preschool closures.